Good evening, everyone. Happy to see that you are also convinced that we need to talk about BlackRock, the world's biggest money machine. I just read here on the screen. My name is Frederik de Jong, journalist, moderator, your host of tonight, and I make a podcast for Follow the Money. Tonight we'll be talking about BlackRock in different forms, in interviews, in presentations, in a panel, and there will be room for you, of course, to ask questions. First of all, I would like to know a little bit about who is here. Who is working in finance? 20 people. Who used to work in finance? Good point. You're the only one. And who is building a pension while they're working now? Okay, and who is aware that their pension is being built partly by, or mostly maybe, by BlackRock? You're with Bright. Supposed to be sustainable. BlackRock. And who heard about BlackRock a year ago? Okay, so you already knew. Let us talk, sorry, we get back to you later. Who would, oh yeah, I know, I remember my last question. Who would like to work for BlackRock? One hand, half a hand? Half a hand, okay. One, yeah, two hands, it's possible. So let us start with one of our first guests. He's an economist, but also an investigative reporter for Follow the Money. And he has written a book called Geld genoeg, maar niet voor jou. Money enough, but not for you. Or enough money, but not for you. It's being translated in many countries now. And his name is Thomas Bolle. Please, Thomas. Hello. I'll give you some water. Your book is being translated. And what will be the English title?
I don't know yet. But plenty of money, I think.
Plenty of money.
Plenty of money.
Yeah. Plenty of money, but not for you. Here's some water for you.
Thanks.
We need to talk about BlackRock. That's what you thought already 8 years ago when you wrote some articles about BlackRock. What gave you the inspiration to write about this company?
Well, BlackRock was quite an unknown name. Especially back then. It was in 2017 that I did this research. I was approached by an international group of journalists who said, well, BlackRock is a really huge country. They manage $6 trillion.
You're saying country, but you mean company. They're almost a country.
They're bigger than countries. And they manage a lot of money. And they are very influential. But nobody knows about them. And then I started looking for information, and it was true. There was only one book that was written on BlackRock. It was only available in German, and the author emailed us that she saw a surge in book sales from our group of international journalists, all ordering her book to know a bit more about BlackRock. And we conducted a few, I think, half a year of research on just explaining what is BlackRock, what do they do, and why do we need to talk about them.
Yeah, and what was the urge back then to talk about them? Apart from the fact that you wanted to know more about this company?
Well, I think the urge to talk about them is still the same as today, because they are really big. And today they are even bigger than they were back then. $6 trillion, that was really big, but right now it's $14 trillion, which is 14,000 billion dollars. It's 14 times the Dutch, little less, 12 times the Dutch economy. But that's the assets under management. That's the amount of assets that they manage for other people.
Yeah, you're mentioning the word asset. It's, for some reason, it's a word that doesn't get into my mind. Every time again, I have to think an asset. Investment, you can also say, right?
Yeah. So what BlackRock does, its core, is people with money, or people who save money with a pension fund, and the pension fund with your money, need someone to manage that money, and most people would like that money to grow, so they'd like a return. And what BlackRock does, it says, okay, everybody who needs someone to manage their money, come to us, and we'll buy assets for you. And now assets can be shares in a company. It can be bonds, loans to governments or companies. And that's what they do for other people.
And that's what they have been doing quite well in.
Yes.
Yeah. Was that right from the beginning?
Well, they've been growing since 2018 from 6 to 14 trillion, but especially from 2009 to 17, 16, that was a really big growth. So after the financial crisis, before they were just a small player. But what makes BlackRock really exceptional from most other asset managers is that they manage most money passively. And that means that if you manage your money actively, you have a bunch of managers who decide what company to buy, what not. We think Shell is going to outperform BP, so we're just going to buy Shell and not BP. But BlackRock does active management, but the biggest part of their portfolio is passive management. And that means they buy everything that is in the index.
And the index is the general place where the biggest companies are actually.
Yeah, so the AEX index is the Dutch stock market, and the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq, those are indexes in the US, but you also have a MSCI World Index. And so you have companies who make these indexes, they put all the big companies in there, and then what BlackRock does, it says, most managers cannot outperform the market. So what we do, we just buy shares in every company. So you will profit, you will go up with the markets, and we ask you just a tiny, tiny management fee. And that tiny, tiny management fee sounds really attractive. So you as a citizen can also now buy, you can put your money through something called iShare with BlackRock, and they will manage your money for you. And you have a small, small piece in every country or every company in all of these indexes around the world. So,
yeah. Do you have any shares?
No.
You had to think a moment.
Yeah, but I don't have any index funds. No, and I
You already mentioned their relationship with pension funds and our pension funds. And is that a strategic? Has that been a strategic maneuver, or is this coincidence? So how did this happen?
Well, if you ask only a tiny, tiny management fee, the only way you're going to make a lot of money is if you manage a lot of money. So that's why they offer their services to pension funds, and they offer all these iShares, which you can easily buy, and everybody can participate. So, yeah, their model is if we grow bigger, we can even make billions with just tiny management fees.
And they don't take a lot of risk, and that's what pension funds also like, maybe.
Well, they just follow the index,
yeah.
So that is attractive. But well, there are two more things that BlackRock does.
So you mean two more? One is passive, one is active?
Yeah, passive management, active management, and then they also have a part of their company which is really good at data risk management, and they have built a system called Aladdin. Like
Aladdin.
Aladdin from
Aladdin.
That's the American pronunciation, but Aladdin. And you see him going on the magical carpet. But that software is being used by almost every other asset manager in the world. Anybody who is serious in risk management uses their system. So they gather a lot of data, and that makes them also really central to risk management for other parties. And then there's a fourth activity that they are really good at, and that is advising governments and big companies. And that's their business branch, which is called BlackRock Solutions.
But this doesn't sound really logic, that you are an investment company who is advising governments.
Well, from a business perspective, it's very attractive because they have a lot of information through Aladdin and through their own investment portfolios, and they leverage that knowledge to advise governments. And then
To advise them with what?
so, for example, after the crisis of 2008, they were the ones advising all the central banks in almost all the important countries to start stimulating the economy by buying up bonds from players in the market, which they were invested in, and to save banks, for example. And this
They advised, they advised governments, hey, we know a few good places where you should put your money, and that was where they were.
They said you have to save all the banks and prop up the market. So they were very generic, and their defense has always been, we have a Chinese wall between our divisions, but the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, he's the head of all these four departments. So he's got to have the Chinese wall in his head. Somehow he's got the head of the asset manager, and then next day he's advising the government, and he has completely forgotten that he is also the biggest asset manager in the world. So this was one of the reasons back then to look into this company, because it is so powerful in many aspects, managing money for other people, but also advising governments to prop up the markets, save the banks. And if you look at their portfolios, they are invested in almost every big company in the world. So, of course, governments stepping in with public money to prop up the markets is in the interest of BlackRock as well.
Do they only give financial advice or also political advice?
Well, they lobby a lot. That's not an official department, I think, of not one of their products. But Larry Fink, who you see over here, in 2016, Mark Rutte, he put a selfie of him and Larry Fink on Facebook. Very proud that he was on the photo with Larry Fink. This man is also now very close to Donald Trump.
He used to be close to Hillary Clinton.
Yes,
now he's close to Trump.
These people are very flexible. You have to be. You have to be if you are the biggest asset manager in the world, and you know that. The new president can have a large influence, and its policies will affect your assets under management and also your bottom line. And he's also very close. He was, for example, also Keir Starmer, who was the previous British Prime Minister, but he was for a long time, since Labour was in power, one of the first people that he invited was Larry Fink from BlackRock to talk about the strategy and the business strategy in the UK. So you see that they have influence on all sides of the political spectrum, and it's a really influential company. And I like to point out that BlackRock is not the only one in its kind. You also have Vanguard, State Street, Fidelity. So you have a few of these really big asset managers who have become larger and larger, and passive investment, just buying up all the shares in the index and of all these major companies, has quite some implications for our economy.
Today I talked to my neighbor who used to work for Goldman Sachs, and he said, I think all the other companies are really glad that everybody is focusing on BlackRock.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing that BlackRock is now a household name. That everybody knows BlackRock. I think there's also some misconceptions. It's not that this company is now running the world, but I do think that if you have so much influence and are a major shareholder in all the big companies, you also have a social responsibility. And therefore, we need to talk about it,
BlackRock. Yeah, okay.
about this company.
That's great. Well, we're doing that right now. This whole evening started because BlackRock said in a Dutch newspaper, the Volkskrant, mostly lately people are talking about us and not with us. And then Fossil Free thought, hey, interesting, we would really like to talk with you. So we invite you at Pakhuis de Zwijger. And so they went to their office. They had a nice conversation, I heard. And we had to wait for a few weeks. And last Friday, BlackRock said that unfortunately they were not coming. Here's their ticket. They prefer to have a one-on-one dialogue with Fossil Free. So there seems to be growing something wonderful between the two of them. But they are not here. Maybe there is someone here who is working for BlackRock. Ooh, is that? Yeah, that could be possible. It's an open evening. Is there someone? No. Okay. Your friend works. She's not coming. She was not interested or she was not available? She's going to the football. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Let's go now to our, please take a seat for a moment, Thomas, because we're going to our second guest. Unfortunately, she's not live here, but she will be with us on the screen. And I heard that some people got starstruck when they heard her name, that she would be here, even on the screen. Her name is Grace Blakely, and she wrote a bunch of books. One of them is Vulture Capitalism. And she's very glad that we are talking about BlackRock now, and she wanted to bring us a message.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace Blakely, author of Vulture Capitalism, and I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about BlackRock. So I want to start with a number, $10 trillion. That's roughly what BlackRock now manages on behalf of its clients. $10 trillion is more than the annual output of every country on earth, bar the United States and China. That's one firm headquartered in Midtown Manhattan, managed by one man, Larry Fink, sitting on a pile of other people's money larger than most economies, larger than most major economies combined. And yet, if you stopped most people on the street and asked them about BlackRock, asked them about asset management, they probably wouldn't have much of an idea as to what that is. At best, they'd say, maybe they manage my pension. And that hiding of the role that these asset managers play in our economy is really important, because we're told that they're just part of the boring plumbing of modern finance, that they're just passive, that they just hold our pensions and our savings, and they just move our money around on the market to generate returns for us. They don't do anything. They're portrayed as neutral and technical institutions. But that story leaves out a huge amount about the power that these asset managers have in our economy. Because when you own a slice of almost every major company in the world, and BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, the big asset managers, they are the largest shareholders, some of the largest shareholders in the overwhelming majority of firms in the S&P 500. You're not just a passive bystander. You are definitely a planner, a capitalist planner. And this is a really important point, because this is at the heart of my argument in Vulture Capitalism, which looks at this idea of capitalist planning, because we're told that there are two ways to run an economy: free markets or centralized state planning. And those two are seen as kind of polar opposites. In this view, capitalism means the market and socialism means the state. And history, we're told, settled on that question a very long time ago. But it's such a fairy tale because capitalism depends upon centralized planning. The question was never whether to plan, it's who does the planning and in whose interests. Corporations plan, banks plan, central banks plan, and the asset managers are such significant planners in the world economy. Just think about what it actually means for 3 firms to be the dominant shareholders across an entire economy. That puts so much power in the hands of the people who are managing these portfolios, political power, economic power. All this means, when an oil major decides whether to drill, when a supermarket decides whether to squeeze its workers or suppliers, when a big corporate landlord decides whether to raise the rent, the same handful of investors sit at every side of that decision table, pushing for profit maximization every time. Why would those owners want the firms in their portfolio to compete with each other, compete into the ground? They wouldn't. They want the whole sector to be as profitable as possible because they own stakes in the whole sector. And so you see this anti-competitive pressure being driven from the top, and you see coordination and capitalist planning instead. And this is planning. It's just capitalist planning. So planning to people who will never be held accountable for the decisions that they're making on everyone else's behalf, decisions that affect all of us. BlackRock isn't the only entity shaping the economy. It's become a kind of 4th branch of government. And in the book, I look at how when the pandemic hit, the Federal Reserve didn't build the machinery to funnel trillions into corporate bond markets on its own. It hired BlackRock to support. This firm was simultaneously advising the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the largest capitalist state in the world, supporting bailouts and managing funds that stood to benefit from it. Brett Christophers, in his book on asset management, says that our lives are in their portfolios, our homes, our water systems, our energy systems. All of this infrastructure is increasingly owned by asset managers. That's not a market. That's a kind of form of private government collecting a toll on daily life. Now, the free marketeers had a name for the danger of unaccountable planners deciding everyone else's fates from on high. Hayek called that the road to serfdom. He warned that concentrating too much power in too few hands would crush human freedom. He pointed the finger at the state. But if we were to take him seriously, then we would look at how that power has become concentrated in the hands of a few powerful corporations and big asset managers who are today's unaccountable planners. They're not sitting in a ministry. They are sitting in offices in Manhattan and managing our pensions and our savings. And this, I think, is why we need to talk about BlackRock. Not because, it's a uniquely terrible organization or it's managed by a uniquely bad man, but because it is such an integral part of this system of capitalist planning that means profits for those at the very top and extraction for everyone else.
Yeah, Grace Blakely was throwing quite some information on us in 5 minutes. This whole idea of what she's saying, okay, either the neoliberalists say either you have a free market or you have a planned economy and you have more government influence there. And she says, no. With neoliberalism, people are also planning things, only it's a very little group like BlackRock or other capitalists. Is that new, that idea?
Well, I'd like to not go into neoliberalism or these container terms. Just focus on BlackRock. I want to just point out 2 things that she mentioned. So BlackRock owns a stake in all big companies. So that really goes against capitalist competition. So, for example, if you own stocks in Coca-Cola, you want them to compete with Pepsi-Cola. And that could say, okay, we need to win market share, we have to lower our prices. But if you own stocks in both Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola, you're not really interested in one of them beating the other one. You're just interested in let them both have high prices and their profits will be higher, and then we will have bigger returns. So they're really anti-capitalistic in a sense that they don't promote competition between companies anymore, and that really increases monopoly profits for the large corporations, and therefore you as pensioners will get higher rewards.
Yeah,
and then the second thing, which is really important, the people who buy iShares, I don't know if anybody owns iShares here in the room, I'm curious.
One, two.
Quite a few.
Quite a few, only two.
Well,
three.
Still.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
In the back there were more. But also, if your pension fund invests in BlackRock and BlackRock invests in all the other companies, you get the increases in share prices and the dividend payments. So you get the monetary reward. But BlackRock is the one who can vote in all the shareholder meetings. And that gives them a lot of power because they are the largest shareholder in almost all the big companies. They have the most important votes together with Vanguard and State Street in all these big companies. And that power really shapes where our economy is heading.
Yeah, and that's why Grace also says we don't have to say they're a bad company with bad people. We just have to put it on the agenda. And that's what we are doing here. Thank you so much, Thomas. Please take your seat. We'll be seeing you later on in the panel. Now it's time for our third guest. Our next guest is a true climate justice professor, Joyita Gupta. Welcome. You're teaching at the UvA, the University of Amsterdam, and the Delft Institute for Water Education. You won several prizes for your research, and I will give you some water before you begin.
Thank you. I'm not an expert on BlackRock. I've learned a lot today from what has been already discussed. But in 2021, I did talk to BlackRock. So I gave a lecture in one of their sustainability courses online for the entire BlackRock community that was interested in listening. And there were some questions, but they never invited me again. So I guess I was quite unsuccessful in talking to them. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about something slightly different. I'm going to focus on climate change, and I'm going to look at BlackRock from the perspective of fossil fuel. And I'll talk about fossil fuel, and I'll talk about fossil fuel lock-ins, the investment lock-in, perhaps a little bit about my guesses about the asset managers and BlackRock, because I don't really do research on them, and then draw some conclusions. So why climate change? So essentially, I think this is one of the biggest problems that we have. And not just simply because I work in climate change, but I'm more and more convinced. Almost every evening I read about climate change somewhere in the world. I think it is the biggest problem we have today. And it will affect every single sector of society. It's going to have cascading impacts on all other environmental elements, such as biodiversity loss or the hydrological cycle. And then, of course, the problem is that if we cross 1.5 degrees, we are at risk of crossing tipping points, which basically means that we come into a world of irreversible changes. And so that is very, very worrying. And finally, I think what's important for us to think about is that since we are quite selfish people, sorry, I'm quite short. Oh, I can hold that. And finally, since we are quite selfish people, let's talk about home. Europe is heating up twice as fast as the rest of the world. So there is quite a serious reason for us here in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and in Europe to think about climate change. All right, so now when we look at climate, why look at fossil fuel? And fossil fuel is the biggest cause of climate change. And that's one of the most important reasons. And moreover, most of the fossil fuel that's left is in the developing world. So about 78% of the remaining fossil fuel. And this means that if we do not help those countries to phase out their fossil fuel, we will suffer here. And they don't have any reason to phase it out because we are not phasing out fossil fuel ourselves. So that's a very big problem for us. The third point, I think, is that markets are not going to phase out fossil fuel. I can give you a number of reasons for that, but later on I'm going to show you the lock-ins, and that's why we come back to BlackRock over there. Renewable energy is slowly substituting for fossil fuel, but in most parts of the world, it is additive. So it's adding to the energy. It's not yet substituting for fossil fuel at the speed at which we need to achieve 1.5. And then if you look at the issue that 2 billion people still lack access to water services, and a lot of water services need energy. They also lack access to direct energy supplies. So just meeting those basic needs of people will have an energy footprint. And that, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, depending on which way you look at it, will most likely be met by fossil fuel unless we take action today. And finally, most of you are probably aware that we are planning to increase our expenses on the military. And that means more fossil fuel. AI also uses a lot of fossil fuel, and this is not being calculated right now in the discussions about 1.5 degrees centigrade. And of course, another reason for taking action is that the cost of taking action is much less than the cost of inaction. But that is on average. So the problem is the person who's going to pay for action on climate change is not necessarily the person who suffers from climate change. And so therefore, a lot of people don't want to take action on climate change because they think somebody else will suffer. All right, so let me now come to my lock-ins. Why do you think we are still investing in fossil fuel? And the biggest reason is profitability. Fossil fuel is 2 to 5 times more profitable than renewables. Now, a lot of factors play into this, but because it's profitable, investors are investing here. Now, one very important reason why it is so profitable is because of discursive lock-in. And this basically means that all of us are talking about net zero, overshoot. Have you heard of net zero? Yes, yes. And overshoot? All right, so most of you, basically it's quite problematic because overshoot means that we can cross 1.5 and come back to 1.5 at the end of the century. But if a glacier has melted, it's not coming back. So the 1.5 we come to is not today's 1.5. And with the use of the language of overshoot, we have normalized the fact that we can continue to use fossil fuel. Ditto for net zero. Net zero means you can keep increasing your emissions as long as you plant some trees somewhere in the world. So both of these are normalizing our behavior to use fossil fuel, which is very good for investors because they like to keep their money in fossil fuel. And of course, the oil companies and the gas companies are talking about technological optimism. Do not worry, there'll be technologies in the future. And they're talking about the fact that you are to blame, not them, because you want to fly, you want to use a car. So that's called strategic blame displacement. So these discourses keep the profitability of fossil fuel high. And that means the company doesn't get reputation loss. So let's look at the next one, legal lock-in. So legal lock-in basically means if I have a contract with a fossil fuel company, and tomorrow, because of Groningen, the earthquakes, because of that, the firm has to close down, they can sue the government for compensation for the loss of income for the rest of their lifetime. Take another case. You all probably recognize these cases because they're happening right now in the Netherlands. Another case. Because some of us have used solar panels, therefore the demand for fossil fuel has gone down in the Netherlands, which means that some of the fossil fuel producers have to close down. But if they have to close down, they sue the government. So they get then compensation under this particular agreement, the Energy Charter Agreement. Now this basically means that fossil fuel companies can never, they will win under each circumstance. Either they win by selling you the oil, or they win because the government has to compensate them. So they're in a win-win position, which means it remains profitable. This is just one of the legal lock-ins. Then let me talk about another lock-in, the investment lock-in. And there are many different dimensions to the investment lock-in. But essentially, basically, I think we've heard a little bit of the lock-in in the earlier presentation, but what you're seeing is that the fossil fuel companies, because they're so attractive, companies want to invest in them, and of course, it's a long-term investment, so if you want to suddenly close down that, you still have to pay back for the loan that you took from that from the lender. So you're stuck in that process, you can't stop, and especially with respect to developing countries, they get a loan from us, they can't stop halfway through because they have to pay back the loan. I'll take another case. This is now fiscal lock-in. Fiscal lock-in is simply about the tax revenue. So oil companies and gas companies pay taxes to their governments. That's used by the government to pay for your street lights and your footpaths and your health care. So this becomes very difficult for the government then to say no to fossil fuel. And then you have infrastructural lock-in. There's so much infrastructure. The biggest infrastructure in the world is fossil fuel. And it's very difficult for us from the port to your house, but also back to the mining infrastructure. There's so much infrastructure in fossil fuel that nobody wants to close those infrastructures down because they cost a lot of money. And then you have, of course, labor lock-in. So many people work in this field, so they don't want to lose their jobs. And paying for a just transition, which is required if you close down the fossil fuel companies, is too expensive, so nobody wants to pay for it. And again, the profitability comes back. If you want to be profitable, you don't want to pay for the just transition. And then you have a few others, behavioral lock-in, political lock-in, and professional lock-in. Political lock-in is very interesting. I think there is an interesting story in what we just now heard, which also links up to political lock-in, but the political lock-in I want to talk about is prime ministers and presidents come for only 4 years. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to tell you you can't drive your car. They don't want to tell you the price of petrol is going up. So basically, they maintain the system. And they keep postponing action to the next government, and the next government, and the next government, till it becomes impossible to solve the problem. And so that is one of the really big challenges we face together today. And I'm sure political lock-in is also supported or manipulated or forced by the big investors. So they're all in bed together trying to work on this issue. And the last one is professional lock-in. And I can just give you an example of myself. I work on climate change for the last 35 years, but if I had to actually work on trying to convince every single organization with which I have a contract to stop using fossil fuel, that would be a lot of work. So I don't do it. And I'm quite sure there are a lot of people in society who really worry about climate change, but don't want to take action in their daily life. And that brings us back to a discussion I was happening with some people behind me just now, which is, don't the people in BlackRock feel uncomfortable? Because how do they go out and have dinner with somebody? Don't people ask them, what do you think about climate change and your investments there? They probably don't want to link those two worlds together. So that's professional lock-in. And that's why we are stuck in this whole place. In terms of investment lock-in, basically, investors want to invest in a technology that they fully know, understand, have a grip on. They don't want to go for renewables because it's something that has not been tried and tested and in all its different formats. So they go back to fossil fuel. If you look at most investors, they want something large. They don't want something small scale. That brings you back to fossil fuel. If you want to look at profitability, oil and coal and gas are much more profitable than renewables in the sense that once you sell the solar panels, the person who gets the solar panels becomes the owner, and they don't have to deal with world market price of oil and coal and gas. Whereas if you were lending to a fossil fuel company, they are linked to the world prices of oil, coal, gas, so they can make much more profits than when you sell renewables. Another argument is that most investors invest in projects, not in systems. So if you invest in renewables, but there is no grid, then the system doesn't work. Whereas with fossil fuel, the entire infrastructure is there. So everything works. So that's one of the reasons why today fossil fuel is really high up on the agenda of most investors. Even if they may be ashamed to do so, they are still investing in it. So I don't understand the money market very well, and I don't know whether all of us understand it or not, but my gut feeling is it looks something like this. This is a caricature, by the way, so it's not perfect. So there's you over there, and you're putting your money in your bank, in your insurance, in your pension, in the share market, the bond market. And then what happens is that money goes to BlackRock, and BlackRock is then going to manage your assets for all these intermediaries of your money. And then BlackRock then probably funds into, has investments in fossil fuel companies, but the others too, directly and indirectly. And then, of course, the asset manager, again, has relationships with banks. As a shareholder in a bank, like ING, for example, or insurance companies, or a pension fund, or some of the companies, and we just heard that they have actually control over a large number of the biggest companies in the world. So essentially, the money movement is a bit strange. And then what happens is the CEOs of all these companies also have shares. And also their shares are in all these other companies. So where the money is going precisely, who is involved in this, I don't understand it. And if anybody's willing to explain it to me, I'd be happy to learn from you. But it is really quite frightening that this money is going round and round in circles, and we don't know how it all eventually lands up in BlackRock or Vanguard. And that they then do the job for you, which we could have done ourselves. And somehow they can do it cheaper for you than if you do it directly, which to me doesn't make sense. It would be easier and cheaper to do it directly, but apparently it's cheaper to do it via. Anyway, that's, that's something I can't quite understand. That's the man at the top of who also has shares on all these different companies, and therefore the whole role of each of these people is completely not transparent and unpredictable. All right, so there are some court cases coming up. If you dare to take BlackRock to court, which isn't very easy because you need to have a lot of resources. So some of the NGOs are taking BlackRock to court because they are misrepresenting facts. And sometimes they're calling their investments sustainable, which are not sustainable. And then BlackRock says they're okay, but they're not okay. Eventually, BlackRock just removed the word sustainable. So that shows basically that the other party won, but it was not acknowledged. It's a very complicated story over there. And then there is another case where we find a number of United States, so 11 states, I think, in total, that took BlackRock to court for market manipulation. On the other side, you also find that shareholders are taking BlackRock to court because they say they want more profits and they don't want BlackRock to invest in sustainability. And I believe there's also a case where the state is taking BlackRock to court and saying, don't be sustainable because that's not part of your fiduciary responsibility. So apparently, BlackRock gets it from both sides, but I think you shouldn't pity BlackRock. It's perfectly able to deal with all these minor cases because of the huge resources that it has. I don't think in the case of BlackRock, the judiciary will help us. I think in the case of BlackRock, the only way to solve the problem is if we are all going to be continuously talking about BlackRock. So not just us in this room, but everybody. We need a social movement if we want to get BlackRock put back in its place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyita. Please have a seat. We see you back in the panel later on. Would you like to take your water? Yes. So the next guest is already getting closer. Hello, Audrey. Audrey Gogren. She is the executive director of SOMO, an organization investigating the impact of multinational corporations. She has over 20 years of experience fighting for human rights and previously leading global research at Amnesty International. Welcome and take the floor. Is the microphone okay?
The microphone is okay, I think, and I brought my own microphone. So. Oh. We're good to go? That's okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for coming out. So we've just heard about BlackRock and climate. I also want to raise another issue where we are concerned about BlackRock, but I'm going to thread it through talking about BlackRock and the system that it's embedded in. We all know that the state of Israel is committing grave crimes under international law, the crimes of genocide, apartheid, war crimes. And those of us who've read recent UN reports know the extraordinary, unspeakable toll on children. It's almost, you lose the words now to be able to talk about what happens in Gaza and the West Bank because the words don't do any good. One of the biggest instruments of the state of Israel in committing the atrocities that are being committed is the defense, the military. The budget of Israel's defense and military has doubled between 2022 and 2024, doubled as a percentage of GDP, as the genocide in Gaza and the other crimes that are being committed have been ongoing. Now, Israel has to raise money, like many states do, and Israel raises money on the bond market. It issued bonds worth $8 billion in mid-2024, another $5 billion at the beginning of 2025. BlackRock bought the bonds. So did many other investors and some of the other big asset managers. So it's not BlackRock on its own, but BlackRock is one of the key players here that is buying Israeli government bonds, knowing what the Israeli government uses money for, and that Israeli government is spending the money on its military and what its military is doing. Israel also holds positions in some of the major and pivotal arms manufacturers that are fueling a genocide. And this has been reported by Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur. And as both the previous speakers have made clear, one of the problems for many, if not all of us in this room, is the size and ubiquity of BlackRock, which means your pension, my pension. Our pensions are probably contributing to something we consider an atrocity of unspeakable proportions in our lifetime, but the system in which we are trapped, we have very few choices, and I'll speak a little bit about the choices we do have, but we have very few choices because we are inside a system, and that system is making us indirectly complicit in these horrors. One of the things that SOMO, Fossil Free, and others have been doing is talking about how do you get pensions and other asset holders to move away from BlackRock. And recently we worked on can you get pensions, and there's been some success in getting pensions in the Netherlands to move from BlackRock and maybe move to European asset managers. But it is difficult because the US asset managers, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, they own well over half of all assets under management in Europe. They are hugely dominant players in Europe. SOMO looked at asset managers in Europe in relation to asset managers in the US, actually over issues of investment in fossil fuel and how they vote in companies in relation to climate positive voting in annual general meetings. And in that process, it was clear that European asset managers tended to vote more often for climate positive solutions than US asset managers. And that was part of a campaign to try and at least move some pensions out of the US asset managers into the European asset managers. And that led us to look at what is the difference between the EU and the US. And I'll put there's a big health warning on what I'm about to say, but there are some differences between these two sectors, European asset and wealth managers and US asset and wealth managers. And the first one's been widely alluded to already, which is the sheer size of the US asset managers. BlackRock is phenomenally enormous. And it has gotten that way, BlackRock in particular, through mergers and acquisitions. In other words, it's bought up other companies to become the size that it is. It's 14 trillion under management that Thomas mentioned. It has accumulated other companies to make itself this huge, big player. European asset managers and wealth managers have been described by critics, and described critically, as a criticism, as being fragmented. The market in Europe is fragmented. That just means that there are multiple medium-sized asset and wealth managers in Europe. But this is considered by European commentators to be a bad thing, because you should be getting big like the US. Fragmented, if you took it another way, is there is more choice. There are more people you can choose to put your pension, to have as asset managers for your pension. And because there's more of them, maybe you can bring a little bit more influence to bear on how they vote and what they do. But fragmentation is the narrative, and fragmentation means you are not doing well enough. So there is a push to get Europe to follow the lead of the US. And that is backed strongly by the European Union, which is currently so bamboozled by the idea of competitiveness and the existential threat to Europe as a global power, as a global economy, that Europe is making some phenomenally interesting and very bad decisions. But a lot of it is pushing European companies to think like American companies. They will never get the scale that the Americans have, but they will cause a lot of damage trying. The other issue that was raised in sort of debate, especially inside SOMO, about European asset managers and any campaigning to promote the idea that European asset managers, that moving pensions from BlackRock to European asset managers was a positive thing, was generally what is called the slightly better culture in Europe of responsible business practice, and the fact that the European Union was seen as regulating this. Now, I have to say, as someone who's worked on corporate power for 30 years, slightly better than the US is a very, very low bar to clear. So when we say Europe is a bit better, we shouldn't take that as a positive thing. It's just, there's just something that's a bit worse. And all of that is being eroded. Those of you who look at regulation in Europe of business know that regulation is toppling all over the place. Ursula von der Leyen and her political ambitions are ensuring that what little gains we've made on regulation of business and on trying to make business act responsibly, and that would include European asset managers in the financial sector, never particularly covered by many of the regulations. But what little gains we've made, those gains are being eroded. And they're being eroded as Europe, in its confused state, thinks competition is a good thing, but wants to be competitive. And Europe never having recognized that the US thinks America first, and Europe thinks capital first. All capital, foreign capital, and therefore Europe ends up protecting US capital. So we are, unfortunately, in a space where the European Union's confusion is likely to drive European wealth management into places that are never going to be as successful as their American counterparts, but definitely making bad choices. So is the solution to have more assets under management in Europe? It's a little bit better than having them managed by BlackRock, but there's also not very many places to go with that. And so we took a step back, and I want to take a bit of a step back to what are we really talking about? Because BlackRock is one actor in a system. And it's already been alluded to how that system works. In fact, that graph that you put up with that was absolutely excellent and a pretty good view of how the system works. So let me give you some practical examples to that. BlackRock is the biggest shareholder. It has the largest shareholding in Shell, the oil company. Shell has given its pension to BlackRock to manage. So there is a symbiotic, parasitic conflict of interest relationship, but it all makes sense if you consider one thing, and I'll come back to that. But another thing to mention, just to show the nature of the relationship, is Vanguard and State Street have been mentioned. They're two massive US asset managers and theoretically in competition with BlackRock. But Vanguard owns part of BlackRock. BlackRock owns part of State Street. State Street owns part of BlackRock. Nobody owns that much of Vanguard because it doesn't trade on the open market. They own part of each other. In fact, they own very substantial parts of each other. So the companies that BlackRock invests in give their pensions to BlackRock, and BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are all owning parts of each other. And that makes sense if you look at one thing. The point of the system, which has already been said, but is really answering your question, the point of the system is that a small number of people get very, very wealthy, and to do that, they need their money to keep making a return. Not make a return, keep making a return. Grow, 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 and grow again. Grow at all costs. Grow at any cost. And the cost is all around us. The planet is collapsing. There's a climate crisis, a biodiversity crisis. The data centers in which BlackRock is a massive investor are going to suck more energy out of the system as well. The system is doing what the system is intended to do. And if we keep trying to fix it without fixing the system, we will not succeed. So what do? We've ended up with BlackRock and the others because that's where this system will always end up. If you want to break the power of BlackRock, you have to break the power of the system that gave birth to BlackRock, encouraged BlackRock, the system in which BlackRock thrives, or else you just wind up with BlackRock 2.0. So while it is incredibly important and necessary that we encourage movement of assets away from this huge giant actor, it is equally important that we understand the system in which it's embedded. And that system is obviously capitalism. And capitalism can be described in 100 complicated ways or one simple one. Capital seeks one thing, a return, always. And as long as we understand that, it makes sense that BlackRock owns part of State Street or whatever it might be, because all they're trying to do is continually grow money. They don't produce goods or services. Their purpose is to make money, grow more money for a small number of people, and they are incredibly successful. They're so successful that while there are court cases going on, actually the Republicans and the Democrats in the US are lobbying them. BlackRock has become so big, governments have to ask it and lobby it the way companies used to lobby and still do lobby governments. The governments now have to lobby these actors because they are so powerful. So we are already watching a switch in the system that is hugely problematic for any concept of democracy. So if we want to move past where we are, we need far more radical solutions, and we need to be willing to make those radical proposals strongly. And I think, is anybody here from civil society? Oh God, that's right, quite depressing. So one person. I work in civil society, and I would say civil society should stand accused of thinking small to be taken seriously. We have made so many mistakes that we will not stand up and say the system is the problem. It is not that you're going to get Ursula von der Leyen et al. To fix the problem. Their entire career depends on the system being as it is. We need radical proposals. Break up the asset managers. They're far too big, like breaking up big tech. They should be dismantled. Prohibit investment under management. Prohibit the management of certain investments by these actors. Simply stop it. But ultimately, make radical proposals that will change the system and then defend and work on those proposals. We think too small, which is why we've ended up with these guys being too big. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Audrey. Very insightful. We see you back in the panel very soon. But first, I would like to introduce our last guest, Vera Vrijmoed from Union FNV. Researcher. Welcome. So, yeah, why not? I will get a glass for you. So how are you feeling after all these stories?
Yeah, a bit depressed. yeah. I think, there's a lot of, right, like there was a lot of truth in all the stories, but I think if you hear this, you can feel very powerless.
Yeah, overwhelmed a bit.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. Yeah.
And what has BlackRock to do with the workers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so I work for a union. So a union is about these people. They together take action to change their lives for the better. These are the workers at Albert Heijn that went on strike for better pay in a period where Albert Heijn was making huge profits because it was increasing the prices. So what does it have to do with BlackRock? Well, I think BlackRock is like Ari said, like an example of this system with a focus of a rate of return, so just to make high profits for these asset managers. And this has real consequences for these people. So it means that their wages are lagging behind. And I would also say that our wages are lagging behind. It's not only these workers at Albert Heijn. And you can see that, for example, in a number which is called the labor quote. And you can imagine it like a pie. It's a pie that shows how we divide, like how the money that is earned in our economy is divided between labor and capital. And this number has been decreasing in the Netherlands as well since the 80s. And that's the real consequence. That means that our wages are lagging behind because capital is making more profit. And that is the real story and the link with BlackRock.
Yeah, and FNV is also campaigning for workers' rights and human rights in the end. Is BlackRock at all interested, you think?
No, I think BlackRock is interested in profits, but I do think it has a consequence for our entire society. So with this focus on profits, the result is a higher rate of inequality. We also have seen this in the Netherlands. So our wealth inequality is very high and our income inequality is increasing. And that in the end is also undermining our democracy. So corporate power is undermining our democracy. And that in the end leads to, for example, cuts in public spending on social services. And that's what we see today with our current government. That wants to cut our unemployment benefits, for example. So I think it all links together and it's very systemic, but it has real consequences for everyday people.
Yeah, and what do you think about the thing that Audrey said? We shouldn't, as I understood it, keep saying it's the system, but we have to look at other parts for change.
Yeah, so I think we have to, if we want to do something about these big asset managers, we have to make very concrete how that, like, what does it matter in my life? How do we feel this? What kind of consequences does it have? And then you have to talk about inequality, about climate change, and also about real pay, and then it's undermining the fabric of our society. That's the essence. And I think what is difficult or challenging, if I can say so, is, for example, that we have also our money in our pensions is sometimes invested in BlackRock. It kind of creates this idea of a conflict of interest, right? So isn't it also in our benefit that BlackRock makes profit for us?
It is in the end.
Maybe it is, but I would say in the larger scheme of things, it's in our profit or in our benefits to have a good functioning society, have good pay, all these other things. But I think we have to navigate this idea of a conflict of interest and also take back some of the, like make sure that our pension, like how it is voted, like how is with our money, the votes in these shares work out. And that's also what people or colleagues of mine try in these pension funds. But it is, I think, the story to navigate.
And is it at all a topic at FNV, BlackRock, and the involvement in the pensions of these people?
So I would say it is. So the people that know. So basically, you have representatives of the union that sit in a board of these pension funds. They do that together with employers and also other members. And there they're very aware. So they have a policy on ESG. Which basically means they don't only want to invest for a rate of return, but also for other aspects of the environment, that it's social and that there's good governance. So that's how they do it. But there's not a movement within the union against BlackRock, no. But
why not?
Well, I think because the link between how does it matter in the lives of these people is not yet made. So you have to make clear that it's about, the difference between how profits are increasing but wages are lagging behind. And I think if you talk about that and tell that story, then it's much more easy to sort of say what kind of system change we need and why we need that system change.
Yeah, you think that's a difficult story to tell?
Yeah, I think it's challenging, but it's worth trying. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Please stay seated, and I would like to ask you to come back. Thomas and Joyita and Audrey, please come back and join us on stage so we can have a panel talk. There are some glasses over there. Did somebody of you meet Larry Fink?
No.
Would you like to...
I just wrote a profile on him on public sources. I really wanted to meet him, but only Mark Rutte could get a selfie with him.
But
so
you emailed, you tried.
Yeah. But it's even difficult to get to talk to people from BlackRock Netherlands, and I think that they aren't here shows that they don't really like to be in these discussions.
So why did they say in an interview recently in the Volkskrant, we don't like it that people talk about us instead of with us? Is that, what kind of expression is that? How do you see that? Audrey?
Well, I think that's just a standard corporate tactic. So there is a corporate strategy called engage, 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 which means neutralize criticism by getting your critic into the room with you and constantly talking to keep them, often civil society, sometimes journalists, from criticizing you publicly because they're kind of stuck in a conversation with you. I worked with Amnesty Netherlands. There's nobody from Amnesty Netherlands here. Well, let me know if you are. I worked at Amnesty Netherlands for years, who had a dialogue with Shell when Shell was based in Netherlands. And that was part of that strategy, which was just every quarter to have a conversation. Ended up like you were in a marriage. It was always talking about the relationship between Amnesty and I came to my colleagues and said, this is a corporate strategy. But when they say they want to talk to you, they do not want to talk to you in a place like this. They want to talk to you behind closed doors where they can control the conversation. And to be fair, they can afford good PR people, and they would have to have atrociously bad PR people for any of them to have told them it would be a good idea to show up here.
Yeah, okay, that's quite clear. One more thing about Larry Fink. You also wrote about him that he was the one who invented one of the products that caused the whole crisis, financial crisis.
He was really good in mortgage-backed securities. He was one of the... He's not the inventor, but he was one of the first to start working with mortgage-backed securities, which they were the product that blew up in 2008 and led to the financial crisis. He's a capitalist, and he is quite clear about the role of investment in this system. And I think, especially in reaction to what Vera said, he acknowledges that within the system, if you are a worker, you cannot really rely on the future that your wages will go up. So the only way to profit is be a capitalist as well. Through your pension fund, via BlackRock, invest. And if you are doing that, you can profit from capitalism and be one of us. And that's what he advocates. So he's quite clear of how the system works. And I think this is a valid observation. And it is the way the world works. So everybody keep quiet and keep your pensions invested in the system, and you will be part of the winners in the system.
Every year he writes a letter to his investors, his clients, sorry. And years ago, the market was shaken a bit because he was talking about investing in sustainable companies. We should go that direction. It only lasted a year, I think. I mean, was that also only strategy, you think, Audrey?
Well, I think it's also, you've got to understand what business means when it says sustainable companies. They mostly mean companies that can be sustained. And when they talk about climate change and climate change risks, they mean the risks to their money, not the risks to the planet. If it's a combination of good public relations, sorry, I am very cynical about big business, obviously, and I have 30 years of working on it to fall back on. But if they say these things, in my experience, if you scratch the surface, it's very little to it. It's either good public relations or individuals. I mean, Larry Fink is a human being. He may well wish to believe himself. There's an awful lot of lying to yourself that they would like to do some good. But that will never, ever trump over profit. So if that got in the way of profit, it would immediately be thrown away, which is what happened when Republican attorneys general in the United States essentially said, the purpose of a company is to make money for shareholders. You do anything else and you're breaking the law. I mean, they threw it over board very quickly, but we also saw that when Donald Trump was elected, how many of the global initiatives on climate change that business and finance were in, the companies left them like that. It was useful for a certain purpose, but if we believed it was deep or real, I think we would be kidding ourselves.
Joyita, you're nodding.
Yep. Yeah, it's. I don't know about the relationship with BlackRock, but all I know is that in the US, almost all my colleagues, all the scientists are being silenced. So their colleagues in climate, in medical risk. So because medicine studies the harm of environmental damage on human health. And justice. Those are three groups of scientists that have been really criticized, and they've lost their money, investment in research on the oceans, on the space. All that has been undermined, especially if it is for the public use. And so you're seeing that, and also, of course, everything that the US controls in one way or the other, whether it's the World Bank or it is any other institution. You're seeing changes in policy come right through simply because somebody is saying something. It may not even be that they're actually being told to change policy, but it is changing all over. We've gone through a reversal on climate policy in the last few years, which has basically made fossil fuel much more profitable. And so I think BlackRock will stay in fossil fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so but I think, so on the voting, in preparation for this, I really looked into the voting, because workers have, they're in pension funds, and these pension funds can vote. So what you see is that these pension funds can sort of buy a product from BlackRock, and then part of that product is also that they can vote. But
and they can vote for what?
Well, that they can sort of say, I'm pension fund X, and then my decisions on like ESG or something, that BlackRock will vote how I want that they vote. So that in itself is a good thing, but then you end up still with a mixed vote. So it's kind of a gray mix, because BlackRock will still decide for a large share what they vote, and then there's a part where the pension funds have decided. So it's a bit of a difficult mix, because it's very convincing from BlackRock's side. Well, you can just tell me what I vote and I will vote.
Yeah, and I even heard that the part that can vote, they don't use it all. So there are companies and people and maybe pension funds who think, yeah, we can vote, but we're not interested.
Yeah, so it also depends on kind of what service they get from BlackRock. And then there was a researcher that looked into it and said only 10% really uses of the all invested money uses this ability to vote. Yeah.
By now, 2 pension funds in the Netherlands have said goodbye to BlackRock.
Yeah.
What do you think? Are they exceptions, or is this a trend?
Well, maybe it will change. I think what is really problematic is that what BlackRock does really well is that it does it for low costs. So basically for small pension funds, it is attractive to still go via BlackRock, because it is the way you get the lowest cost. And it kind of works like Amazon. It reminded me of Amazon, where you can really cheaply buy something, and then they got a lot of power. And I think that's the mechanism at play here as well.
Yeah, so what I hear is, and in the end we're still Dutch, so we're going for the lowest cost. Is that what you're also thinking?
Well, no, I think so. There's the big pension funds are not doing it that way, but I think that's the risk, or I think that's how you can explain that some smaller pension funds why they act this way.
Yeah, but do you think there will more pension funds will follow? Breaking with BlackRock?
I don't know. I can't really guess on this front. I've seen that in other areas, there are a couple of companies that lead and then nobody else follows. But to get everyone else to follow, that there's a domino effect, requires a much greater social support for that action. Otherwise, it won't happen. It's just a statement, and maybe they're doing for reputation gain. I don't know. But I haven't studied this particular case. But I just wanted to come back and say 2 things over here. One is that
these companies only react to their shareholders, but they don't react to their stakeholders. So there are stakeholders all over the place, from the miners who work in the mining companies all the way to the people who are influenced because of the air pollution, water and soil pollution, or climate change that they cause. And none of that seems to make a difference to them. And somehow this whole business of just focusing on the shareholder and not on the stakeholder, that is a fundamental change that we have to bring to the system of the way...
Focusing by who? Who is only focusing on the shareholders?
Most of the companies only focus on the shareholders, not on the stakeholders around them. And the more powerful the company becomes, the more distant they are from the shareholders. So if there are many via investment processes, they don't really see the stakeholders. And I think that's something that has to be changed. The other point I wanted to make is that here we are talking about BlackRock and Vanguard, and earlier this afternoon we were talking about Amazon, Microsoft, and I forget the third, Google. The three big tech companies running the world, and you have the three big asset managers running the world, and you're having this oligarchy. It is really, really frightening, because you're seeing that the tech brothers and the asset holders at the top, and asset managers at the top, and then you're seeing governments at the top, and they're all coming together in this very strange situation in which I think governments are almost held at ransom by these big organizations. So it's bigger than just BlackRock. I mean, it's a bigger trend that I see.
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree. And I think we have to look at the whole issue of size and monopoly power, because that has grown under our noses for 10, 12 years, and it's been allowed to get to this stage where companies are bigger than states, and states have to be beholden to companies, and that's massively true in the tech sector. But I also think there's a clear legal construct with... Companies don't care about stakeholders. They care about stakeholders on their website, and they put up some nice pictures and some stuff. But the purpose of companies, and it is the purpose of companies, is to maximize value for shareholders. That is their function. They are not there to make oil or oranges. These are incidental. The purpose of the modern multinational company is to make value, to create value for shareholders. And so long as that's the doctrine that underpins modern multinational corporations, nothing else matters. Everything else can be written about, but nothing else matters except that, which is where BlackRock comes in. It's that on steroids.
Yeah, on steroids. Well, this is almost like the last sentence, and then we all go home like, okay, yeah. But it's time for you now.
Frédéric, I would like, because we're talking about capitalism as a system, and I enjoy this criticism. I can be the journalist here and just describe how the system works. And I think a lot of the arrows are now pointed at BlackRock, but what they do is passive management. So they just buy all the companies in the index. And they don't do divestment. There's no way they're gonna divest from Shell and BP because of climate change. Because Shell and BP are in the indexes, so they keep buying them. The only thing that they actually can do is vote in the shareholder meeting for certain policies. And if, for example, if Follow This, the action group that holds shares in Shell and BP, says, okay, you company need to do more, let's vote for that. BlackRock has, from 2018, 2020, they wrote letters that they were climate conscious and they would start supporting these kind of proposals. But now the flexibility of Mr. Fink has shown again that now Donald Trump is in the White House, and it's really not very tactical to be against climate change. So you just deny all these things. These words have disappeared from all the letters, and now the company, because in reality they never really did what he wrote in those letters. They always supported only 20% of the progressive proposals. Now it's down to 2%. So
well, they still say we do what our clients want. So if the clients want sustainable investments, we can offer them, and they do offer them.
That is a bad defense, because he actually could write these letters, and they do have a big voice because they're representing all our pension voting, and you can only opt out if you do a lot of work, and only 10% of the assets under management do that. if we want to go for divestment, which you were talking about, I think it is a big step if two of our biggest pension funds actually step out of passive investment, BlackRock, and they say, okay, we don't want to be in passive investment because that means we are going to buy the whole index, and in this index there's a lot of very polluting companies, and it's mostly big companies. So you should put your money where it actually is steering the economy in a different direction. And that means active management by these pension funds, and then they have to look for smaller parties that actually have a vision in more than just returns on the equity. And then we have to accept that maybe your pension will be a little lower.
Let us go to the audience for a moment. Is there a question? Oh, there are a few. Yes, there is.
Question, but I'm always from the basics.
Can you stand up?
Yes. Which two pension funds in the Netherlands have retreated from BlackRock?
I think it's PZW and PME.
Yeah, the metal group and the health and insurance. Nee, hoe heet het nou? Gezondheids.
Ja, zorg en welzijn.
Zorg en welzijn. Not ABP. No. They're still thinking about it, I hope. Over here? Or over here?
Yes, sorry, I only remember your first name is Audrey. She talked about you have to break the system that gave power to BlackRock. What do you see as the system that gave power to BlackRock? So what do we need to break?
Capitalism.
Yeah, but in that line, I mean, you know, capitalism, I have a feeling it's more like a system of amorality, that we're all not willing to, you know, capitalism is just a system, we earn some money, but are we willing to have the moral discussion on the, you know, the excesses of that system? You know, we're all just being quiet about it in a certain way.
I would say it's a difficult thing because you talk about capitalism, people think it's incredibly naive and they ask, what's the alternative? So let's talk about, first of all, the alternative to capitalism is not communism. There are a lot of thinkers and movements that are talking about post-capitalist, post-growth agendas. Capitalism, when we say the excesses of capitalism, that's an oxymoron. Capitalism is about excess. That is the entire point of it. It's this needs to keep growing and growing and growing. And Thomas, you said people think this is how the world works. I'd say two things. They're right in a colloquial sense, this is how the world works. But if climate change keeps going at the rate and biodiversity loss, the world will not work for anybody at all. We are heading in a particular direction. Capitalism, with its central idea of growth and returns for capital, which is a highly amoral, stick capitalism in the capital in the center and make it grow. If we do not break with that system, then we will never get past climate change. It will go to where it needs to go. I will also say, and this is hard for a woman who grew up Irish Catholic and had to deal with the trauma of it, but I will say, in almost every major world religion, there is a prohibition on something called usury. Usury is lending money for profit. And for hundreds, if not thousands of years, wise people knew that that was a terrible idea. Our entire global economy is based on something many people know was a disaster, and this is where it leads to. And the alternative isn't some ready-made system. The alternative is to break down the system that we have and build in the safety nets. But I will tell you one thing.
And keep the good parts and leave the bad parts out.
Capitalism doesn't have good parts. We need to stop thinking capitalism
well, this is the thing we have been talking. No, but this is, I understand you're clapping, but you could argue that the positive part is that we're all profiting.
No, we're not all
profiting. Through the pension funds.
Sorry. Most of the people on this planet are not profiting. Capitalism is also highly racialized. Capitalism extracts wealth from the global south, and it was built on the foundations of colonialism. And all of that is such gross injustice that to say we're all profiting, it is not true.
Okay,
a bunch of white people in the north may be profiting.
Okay. No, but coming... Yeah, you're right. But then coming back to the Netherlands and those pension funds, why only 2 pension funds left BlackRock?
I think it is for the reasons of it's easy, the fees are small, and it's like a lot of things to do with the blaming of climate change on our individual choices. We are in a system, the system forces certain choices. We should keep pushing pension funds to leave BlackRock and at the same time do some of the more radical things. And I will mention one radical thing that a lot of people are working on at the moment, which is expropriation of wealth from those who have accumulated wealth in unjust ways, starting with Elon Musk. At a certain point, we have to take it back and build safety nets for pensions, and all of the things that if we break capitalism will hurt people. But if we expropriate the ill-gotten wealth, take it back from the teeny-weeny minority who have it. I mean, we can take the British Virgin Islands. It's a small place. It sounds joking, but honestly, if we don't break that, I don't know how anything we're talking about will ever really work.
Thank you. Here is a... Please.
I have a question. I was wondering if we can even have like a healthy form of pension funds, because it's always relying on growth, right? But yeah, can you maybe...
So I think Rodrigo Fernandez did really interesting research that...
he's also from SOMO, eh?
He's from SOMO, yeah.
Yeah.
That basically, he did his PhD on it, that after the Second World War, there was a period where pension funds were much more active in steering the money. So, for example, ABP invested in housing and built social housing. There was a way to do it. So I think that is very inspiring as an alternative. And I think also, I mean, I don't want to defend the pension system here. It's also not my expertise. But they are really trying. And I think it's a really fair point on shareholder value. I think our money should be invested in companies that take people and the planet first. So it should be for companies that actually take this whole range of shareholders centrally. And it is true that we then need to change something about, for example, the corporate governance, so that about the whole structure of what a corporation is. But that's not impossible, because also after the Second World War, there was a period in which that was also true in the Netherlands. But of course, I mean, if you talk about colonialism, that was also a period of still strong colonialism. So it's a bit nuanced, but I think it is not impossible. Yeah.
Maybe some people in the back?
Behind you.
Do we know what is the legal structure behind all of this? Because, for example, companies are obliged to provide profit for their shareholders. And also there has been some work done on creating a law like ecocide, to make ecocide a crime against humanity. So do we know about the legal structures behind this system? And is there a possibility for us?
So with some of these companies, so when you're talking about pension funds, there's a fiduciary responsibility. So the law writes down that it is the duty of the pension fund to look after the money of its pensioners. And then there is a question of what does that looking after mean? And some people want to argue that looking after also means taking care of the money of the pensioner in the long term. And if you're looking at it in the long term, then you should also take into account the impacts on climate change, biodiversity loss, the hydrological cycle. At the same time, others will argue that that's not the case. So right now, the issue with respect to fiduciary responsibility is something that is being debated in different parts of the world as to what does fiduciary responsibility mean and what does it not allow. The issue of ecocide is slightly different, because ecocide is when you take a company to court for having destroyed a part of nature, which you see as the murder, if you like homicide, the murder of nature. So you're then trying, it's a criminal case where you're trying to hold the individuals in the company personally liable for those acts, or maybe even the company liable for those acts. And that you can still do. I think there's nothing stopping us from taking all these companies to court on the basis of which, on on the basis of the argument that they have caused significant harm to others. We can do that, and the International Court of Justice already very clearly states in its advisory opinion that nation states, if they continue to use fossil fuels, that could be seen as an internationally wrongful act, and that nation states are responsible for every single actor within their country investing, say, in fossil fuels. So that basically means that in some ways, if you interpret that further, that means all companies are responsible not to invest in fossil fuel. But the question is, when will this be part of the fiduciary system? Do we need to wait till the fiduciary law changes, or do we take them to court and through a court try to change the fiduciary law?
And taking them to court, is that something that would fall under civil society, what you mentioned?
Well, yeah, I mean, SOMO has a strategic litigation department. A lot of civil society organizations do, and we sue companies or make criminal complaints if they've committed criminal acts. But it's a good strategy, and a lot more of it is being done, but you have to take account of the fact that civil society has this much resources, and they have phenomenal resources. So you're taking on a very big fight, but those fights are being taken on and regularly.
But the problem over here is bigger, because these big companies are trying to ensure that these small civil society organizations shrink even further. So you see a huge amount of pressure to cut down resources given to NGOs, also to demand behavior from NGOs that are impossible for them to function within the European Union. And on the other hand, we're seeing SLAP litigation, strategic litigation against public participation, so big cases against Greenpeace that can almost make it bankrupt. So we see all kinds. In fact, the space for civil society is shrinking, in my view. I don't know if you experience it as such, but the research shows that.
No, that's very definitely true.
Hi, I have a question to Thomas. You gave the example of Pepsi and Coca-Cola, and how asset managers investing in both of them is essentially anti-competitive, if I understand it correctly. Does that mean that being anti-BlackRock means pro-capitalist, or
pro-competition?
Yeah, okay, but to me, that's maybe then a bit synonymous. Competition, capitalism, perhaps. But I'm genuinely a bit confused about what is pro and anti-capitalism in this discussion. So I would like to ask for some.
Well,
yeah.
In this model, okay. So apart from all the revolutionary ideas, just from I feel like I'm more looking at the system as it is, and looking at how it is not delivering on certain promises of competition, and that if we have competition between companies, it will be good for the consumer in the end, because we'll all benefit from great products and lower prices. BlackRock is really inhibiting these mechanics, because they themselves are growing bigger and bigger. They support bigger and bigger companies within certain sectors, and all these parties, as Audrey and Jojita also described, are interconnected. So they are fine with this system, because they don't have to compete against each other, because their shareholders just love monopoly profits, and they will grow bigger and bigger, take over their competitors, and BlackRock will just invest in all of these companies. So this is just a winner takes all, and in the end you have a few super companies who don't have to compete with each other, and this is really going against the idea of competition within a capitalist society. So that's, even if we stay within the system of capitalism, these developments of owning so much in all these major industries and all these major companies within one industry is creating monopoly powers. And even if you are a fan of capitalism, that should shock you. So.
Okay, one more question here in the front, and then some other questions. I just heard we have until 10, right?
I was wondering, because you said that NGOs are being cut, things like that. We're putting, I think, tonight the finger on the sore spot, But what I personally would like to know is, what can I do? What can he do? What can she do? In terms of fighting this incredible monster?
I don't know. I have a standard answer for this, so maybe it doesn't work. But I tell, because all my students say to me, what do you want us to do in terms of fossil fuel or in terms of biodiversity loss? Or I say, write letters to the parliament, because my feeling is people in our parliament do not get that many letters. So if you write letters, they do take it seriously and they do discuss. So if you can mobilize people to write a whole lot of letters to Parliament saying what's happening, then we get some reaction over there, because we do need them to wake up on whether it's Palestine or it's BlackRock or it's climate change. We need to be less indifferent. And I think our society is a little apathetic and a bit relaxed. We don't write letters. We need to write letters to Parliament. 1 a week.
Yeah.
Wake up the society.
Yeah, wake up the society. That's a nice phrase.
Hi, is boycotting an effective method as an individual to decrease their powers? So instead of buying Pepsi or Cola, you can go for Fritz Cola, or instead of McDonald's and Burger King, we can go for a local fast food store.
Yeah, it's a boycott, an idea.
I'm going to answer this also. From my view, an individual action at this point is useless in relation to climate change or BlackRock or Google. They're too big. We really have to write 1 letter per week. It requires that kind of action. You need to make sure that all your neighbors also write the letter. You need to make sure your friends write, your boyfriend writes, everybody. Because the point is that every action that you take is going to be a drop of, it's not going to be that much. So we have to mobilize, scale up.
I would say, in addition, I think we need to organize a really big movement. So it's also really about bringing people together, like standing around people that are vulnerable, creating safety nets for each other if there's financial needs, and then organizing big movements that are capable, in the end, of changing regulation at a national and international level. That's kind of what we need to change the system. So in the end, you need to go that far, I think. And I think striking as a power, so you need economic
It's a
power.
real FNV we're hearing here
Yeah.
now.
So I'm just going, striking is really powerful, because you ensure that the company is not running for a day. And that costs money, and capitalists listen to that kind of signal.
Okay.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's very inspiring for me to listen to all of you talk. And I think I have one generic question. How do you fight against people that have a broken moral compass?
What frightens me is, how do we fight an algorithm with no moral compass? And that's coming. So I don't know, you might want to take this question. I'm more afraid of the algorithm.
I think if you make the fight about the people, individuals, that's not where the fight is. That's why I'm talking, and I could not agree more about waking ourselves, our friends, our neighbours, our families up, building movements and acting in solidarity and acting in broad solidarity. This is important, but you're talking about a system. If we start to make it, when will I convince Larry Fink to have a moral compass, or Donald Trump, we might as well give up. They are a symptom of a problem. And we need to deal with the radical root of the problem, and waking up to what we have allowed to happen while we've been asleep, especially in Europe and the global north. That is extremely important, and being willing to be a bit uncomfortable. And that's also something we've been trained not to be willing to be. We have to be uncomfortable if we are going to change things.
And maybe less, like you say, individual. And that reminds me that I listened to a podcast with Grace Blakely, and she's now working on a book talking about how we became so individual altogether. And then in the end, hopefully she will also give us some advice on how to become communities again and movements.
We sort of lost the idea that we should change the system, because it's a great strategy to have made us all complicit within the system. So if you look at changing the housing market, which I've been doing, that's really difficult because 60% of the people are now house owners, and they feel, okay, I am now on the winning side of the system, so let's keep it. Now, if you talk, that's great for you, but a lot of people still do that, and that's also the same with these pension fund contributions. So what you do is you have saved some money. It's with your pension fund, which invested through BlackRock, and you should be very happy with the profits coming from that. But you don't realize, or most people don't realize, that it comes from squeezing the wages of workers, and that is you contributing. So are you really a winner in the system, or are you one of the losers, but you get a little bit back and now you feel like you are part of the system? And I think the system has convinced most people that the best they can do is just take what you get. And I think we should realize that looking at the system as a whole, it's for most people, it's not in their interest. And that should really change. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All the questions are at this part now.
Yeah, and not to put too much pressure on Hiske later, but she will give a short talk about also what we can do concretely as pension savers against BlackRock and how we can build our movement. So.
Thank you for this cliffhanger.
Okay, one final remark. I think BlackRock is too big for Holland to take on, but not too big for Europe.
Yeah, that's why I also said international movement. I think this is a...
especially Europe, because, let's face it, the global south is completely fractured. America is of no use, because that's where the problems come from, especially the Trump government, the Trump regime. I think Europe is our only chance to stop this. And unfortunately, the Christian Democrats in Europe are blocking any progress. Like the VVD is blocking any progress in Holland.
Yeah, so I think, maybe apart from whether it's the only place, it's the place where we have influence. And it's our responsibility to take action. So I think that's where at least my thinking would start.
Yeah, thank you. You talked about these two pension funds that already moved their money away from BlackRock. And I'm wondering if you, or maybe I'm getting ahead of it, and Hiske will talk about this later, if you can talk a bit more about how that happened and how we can push more large money holders and big actors to move their money away from BlackRock as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what Hiske will be talking about in a few minutes. But thank you for your question and getting us sharp again.
Hi. So I think I don't have a pension personally, but I am an individual investor. So are there any ethical brokers or any ethical stock that we can put our money as a proxy pension?
Any investment advice? Yeah, here's the person who said he's with Bright Pension. So you can talk to him later on. Do you agree? Yeah, the red shirt. He's available for questions. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question for Thomas. So obviously you work a lot on the system of money creation and how our current system of money creation has huge political and social influence. And I was wondering how a more public system of money creation could help us against these big asset managers like BlackRock.
I think we should discuss that at the bar. But I think this is such a big question, and I think this. Let's stay here with the asset manager economy. I'll talk to you at the bar.
Yes, because this is about the whole money system, and you wrote a whole book about it. So you're right, that takes too long. We have room for one more question, and then Hiske will come up.
Okay, a two-part question. What is the role of cities and city government? And the other one is, what is the role of the world's religions if you talk about the ban against usury and things like that? Are there any creative possibilities there in either of these two spaces?
Well, I'm going to say, first of all, look at what Zohran Mamdani is doing in New York and get Zohran Mamdani ++++. and then back the living daylights out of people who are willing to stand up to what, I mean, metaphorically, they threw rocks at him. Billionaires threatened all over the place, and he still won. So I think we should amplify where we see it, and that cities can do a lot, and that they may be the spaces where braver political actors can get their start. And that's then on all of us in the cities that we're involved in. Religion, I think the current context probably means that we need to talk more with religious leaders. For some of us, depending on our history, that can be a challenging concept. But if we're going to build movements, then we need to also recognize that a lot of people of faith really do see that there's a problem with the world, and that you can get religious activism. But yes, again, I would say I obviously grew up in a religion that did a lot of damage to women, to a lot of damage to LGBTQI people, and it can be hard to get over that. But I still think finding common ground when it comes to a system that's damaging us all, we should be doing more work on that.
That's great. Thank you. I would like to thank all four of you very much. Thank you for all your insightful talks. And now we have time for Hiske Arts from Fossil Free, campaigner. And I'm curious, Hiske, and let me see, here's a microphone for you. Yes. Hello.
Yeah.
So this was your night, Fossil Free. You wanted to talk with BlackRock, but it ended up we talked about BlackRock. They don't like it, but yeah, this is the way it went. Any thoughts?
I think I'm just like impressed and a bit overloaded by like the brilliant way how you expressed the problem and talked about it. And it just, I mean, we are always talking about breaking the power with BlackRock, and we've been campaigning on it. But in the end, we need to think about this new system and how we're going to get there and all the steps that we need. And I think you really open up a discussion to that level. And I'm very excited and like very thankful for that.
Okay, great. And now our question, we couldn't wait with the question, what can we do? What can people do? Is there something to do?
I think there's a lot that we can do. We started this campaign like 1.5 years ago, and actually I think the idea of this campaign started at the day that PSW, like the pension fund for the healthcare, they divested from fossil fuels. And at the same day, BlackRock decided to move out of Climate Action 100+, like a coalition of investors where they work together on climate change. And they dropped out. And it was like this idea, like we are doing all this work in the Netherlands, but those biggest asset managers, they are moving backwards. And we have to stand up against them. And so we have been doing this campaign and calling upon pension funds to break with BlackRock. And 2 of them did already. And I think to us, it has been like very surprising that when we do actions, we get like thumbs up from the people who work at pension funds. We have board members who say to us that they agree because they also believe that the power of those asset managers is dangerous. They also believe in kind of like autonomy. And they don't make the step because they fall into this trap of like keeping it like it always was. And if we get in, and if we are there to pressure them and to ask them again and again, like break with BlackRock, I think we are able to get it on the agenda. This has already been proven by those 2 pension funds that have broken.
Yeah, how did it go? Because the lady in the back wanted to know, how did you do this?
Yeah, how did we do it? It was like basically like, asking, like we asked people who are building up pensions to write letters to their own pension fund. We launched a petition targeting ABP. We did action at many events, like calling upon them. And also, of course, there is also a movement within pension funds moving away from passive investment to active investments. And it's not like a coincidence that PSW and PME both are like trying to make this move. away from them. So I think it's pressure.
Trying, or did they go away?
Yeah, they want to have more active investments.
Okay.
And in that decision, they also said goodbye to BlackRock. So I think what we need to do is to organize, to mobilize, to get your colleagues, and to call upon your pension funds to break with BlackRock. Outside, after this meeting, we are going to stand over there and we are going to connect you to each other. And so that you can work together with people from your own pension fund, like targeting your pension fund. And please be aware, like many of you might not know that your pension fund is working with BlackRock. You might think, hey, I'm with Bright Pensioen, so I am not working with BlackRock. I have a surprise for you.
Oh no!
So we are all connected. Almost all of us are connected to BlackRock. And there is so much organizing to do, and we can do it if we speak up. And I just really think that we need to make this move together. Because it's not going to solve capitalism. I think we all know that. It's not going to solve all the problems that we have with like big asset managers. But it's a very strong signal that we need at this moment, at this time.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Let's go outside to talk to Fossil Free, and let's go down to the bar to talk with Thomas about the money system.